Hello and welcome everyone. Today I am Rebecca from Seawolf Sustainability Consulting and really pleased today to be joined by Ray. So Ray, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. I'm Ray Dhirani, and I currently lead the capital markets or sustainable finance work for the MSC and ASC. So that's the Marine Stewardship Council and the Aquaculture Stewardship Council. And I'm based just outside of London.
Amazing. Well, great to see you today, Ray. And going to hear a little bit about how uh, you were in that role and what that means and some of the connection with financial services. So perhaps starting there, what's your connection with financial services? Perhaps a bit more about your background there.
Sure. So I went to university in the US, though I'm Canadian. And after that, started in financial services in New York City, worked in markets, foreign exchange and rates. Not much to do with sustainability at the time for about 8 years. And then, yeah, decided to to change tact in a way and study again and do a degree in environment and development, which has led me down a path towards within sustainability and focused on sustainable finance. But yeah, I had sort of spent almost a decade working in financial services before the financial crisis and sort of during and shortly after. So it was very interesting. Saw a lot and experienced a lot during that time. And yeah, and I've worked in a few different countries too.
Wow, amazing. And I can't wait to hear a bit more about sort of what you're doing now. But just going back to that time, um, what was your experience like? How did it look and feel when you were back working in financial services at that time? And particularly with the financial crisis, I know that was quite a big moment in my career where I started reflecting more about the industry, but curious about your own experience.
Yeah, and it's a good question. I remember when I first started in 2002, walking onto sort of a trading floor within a large US investment bank and just seeing like the sea of people and, the sea of screens and thinking, these are people who work and, coming to work at 6:30 in the morning and staying till 5:30, so 11-hour days, approximately. So yeah, I remember starting, super early and markets being open, a lot of markets being open 24 hours a day, particularly in foreign exchange. So there's lots to take in. And, it's a very kind of fun, collaborative environment as well, but also at the same time, quite, I guess, singular in focus in terms of profits and driving the finance through the system, but certainly after a few years felt that certainly lacked a higher purpose in a way, which is one of the motivations to do something sort of on the side of finance, but very much integrated with the financial landscape. But yeah, I think lots of good experiences, friends, contacts, learnings, and a very fast-paced, fun environment. At least until the financial crisis hit, which I think changed changed a lot, but maybe not enough. So that's something we can discuss too.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's a good place to yeah, spend a bit of time because I think it did evolve and I recognize I think from my side as well, it really evolved during the time as I was there. I started in the year 2000 in London in investment banking and as you say it was lots of people, quite social as well, very early starts, intense days, lots of spreadsheets as I remember. Um, and after the financial crisis, certainly a lot more regulation. I was then in different roles. Um, and yeah, so quite an evolution, I think, during that time, for good and for bad. But how did you sort of see that? How did you see it evolve during your time?
Yeah, I mean, I think in 2002, and sort of going onwards from there, it was a year after September 11th, and these sort of really sad and tragic events that occurred in New York City. So I think there was definitely that sense of rebuilding and camaraderie and getting going again. And that I think that feeling sustained. And but you also saw sort of even after just a few years that sort of excessive risk-taking culture, particularly in the U.S. But also in other places, and we kind of saw the result of that soon after. So the feeling from 2002 to 2007-8, changed quite a bit. And in tandem, I started kind of reading around environment and development issues, and yeah, sort of begun to want to, make a more positive difference in the work I was doing. So yeah, I think lots of different factors there, but I also had to help put my brother through university, so that was good motivation to stay a little bit longer and enable that to happen. So yeah, I think lots of different feelings and emotions throughout. And yeah, lots of great connections, you make for life during that time as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I yeah, I totally agree from my side. Lots of people I'm still in touch with today. Absolutely fantastic people who I worked with. And I think you mentioned earlier that there were changes after the financial crisis, but perhaps not enough, and about that excessive risk-taking culture. And I think that was, again, sort of speaking more personally, it was a big moment for me where I really started asking questions about the industry. I think prior to that, I was sort of had quite strong beliefs around finance being the solution to many of the world's problems, et cetera, and that was really a moment where I thought, "Oh, this isn't quite what I thought," and really started questioning myself, the industry, lots of other things, and thinking about how it could change. Um, but how about you when you think about those takeaways of maybe there was change, but maybe not enough? How do you reflect on that now?
I mean, I think it's certainly there was change during the financial crisis, but I think people's memories are quite short, and that sort of going back to a certain culture, and short-termism, and I think ultimately,
Mm,
the financial system needs to be rebuilt back into the the nature system and the climate system and the social system and the fabric of society, and that's what we're sort of trying to de facto do through working in sustainability, I think. And until that happens, it's almost like it operates in its own vacuum in a way, without sort of fully respecting the boundaries set by nature and um, the equality that needs to happen across society. So, and that hasn't gone away. That's a structural issue, and that's a more systems change approach, which we need to all be contributing to. So I think it has changed in the sense that regulation is more pertinent now. There's certainly more policies and checks and balances in place, but there are lots of pockets where a lot of the behavior has reverted back, and memories are short. And again, short-termism and individual sort of motivations around what finance can and should be. So there's a lot of work to do for those who sort of maybe understand parts of finance but can work to change it, because it is really a massive force for can be a force for good. But I don't think we fully harness that. And if we don't, we're going to see crisis after crisis, including the nature and climate and social crises that affect the finance system in earnest. So there is a lot to do still, and there's been some change and there's some real leaders. But I think ultimately, how do we get the finance system back into the confines of the rest of the social and natural systems that exist? That is the big challenge. So yeah, but that's quite motivating as well. And we're making some progress, but we have a lot more to do.
yeah, here, here. And I, yeah, certainly recognise that short-termism and also the disconnect. I think very often with finance, it feels very disconnected from people and nature. So it's sort of just numbers on a spreadsheet or numbers on a computer, and it's often that connection that somehow is lost. Um, And yeah, you're sort of starting to touch on what you do now, and I'd love to hear a bit more about that. So yeah, please, share a bit more about what you do now, or perhaps that career journey since working in finance and working on some of those changes.
Sure. So I guess after I left finance, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I think, people tell you to sort of have a master plan and be thinking about your next step, etc. I don't know. I don't really know about that. I think the other way to do it is go out and learn what you want to learn and go and do what you think is interesting. And I had no big master plan. I mean, after doing a master's only because I wanted to learn more about environment and development and how those intersect because you don't want to make progress environmentally, but then socially leave people behind. That's not going to be good net in balance. So I think just that whole aspect was really interesting to learn about and not knowing where that would take me. And I think that's okay. I think having that kind of full plan up front might limit you actually, and just keeping a more exploratory, curious mindset. So that, at least that was my approach. And then, yeah, working at WWF for a decade and then eventually leading their finance team and work taught me a lot, and met very interesting and different people who are motivated by very different things, which is really nice. And then now really focused on oceans and blue economy and sustainable seafood. So that is a growing area, really important. And you mentioned how the finance sector can get sort of divorced from the real issues at stake. And I think that's an important comment. I mean, we recently did an investor trip to a fish farm. That was highly enlightening and, a good learning experience for me and also for, the investors. And I think similarly for fisheries is another thing to do, to kind of connect that finance to the issues and allow people the chance to understand and explore around what the impacts actually are of pressing numbers in a spreadsheet and what that means out there in the real world. So yeah, I think the whole climate area obviously has had a lot of attention and needs to continue. But I think more recent has been the attention around nature, food systems, and how the finance sector can be leveraged to play its role there. And MSC and ASC certification play a key role, especially when it comes to oceans and sustainable seafood. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey so far, and yeah, very motivated by what I'm doing and who I'm working with and what we're trying to do. And I think, in short, that is really trying to sustain the health of our oceans, which are in peril. And fishing is and production of fish through farming is an area that needs to be tackled in order to achieve healthy oceans. So it is really important to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And just for those who may not know, you mentioned the blue economy and fish farms, and um, yeah, what does that really mean? So I can guess, but is there a definition, or is there a way that you think about that when you think about the scope? Does it? And I'm just thinking out loud now. Does it include the ocean, rivers? Is it all types of fish? Is it shellfish as well? It'd just be interesting to hear a bit more about how you think about the scope of that. It feels like it could be really huge when you think about the amount of water there is in the world.
Yeah, and in fact, there's definitely more biodiversity in the oceans than in the terrestrial system. So we need to keep having that focus, and I think most people might not also know that at the moment we as a population globally, we eat more farm fish than we do wild fish,
Wow.
for reasons that we've seen wild stock decline, so and that will increase, but that also means that the wild fish stock needs to continue to be managed well in the future, because we're seeing a big increase in demand for protein derived from fish. And we have an increased understanding of the health benefits of eating good quality fish protein. So yeah, blue economy is really how do we harness the power of the oceans, both from the perspective of sort of food production and contributing to the economy, but very importantly also the conservation side, and keeping oceans healthy for future generations. And then I think interesting for with fish is that it brings in the whole food nexus.
Mm.
How do we feed a growing population at least till 2050? And then, we might start to see population declines, but we're seeing population increases, and we're seeing people wanting to eat more different types of protein, including fish. And what will that mean for food production, for food security? And you have almost 3 billion people worldwide that are depending on fish for part of their daily protein. So it's absolutely massive. And also the millions of people who work within the seafood supply chain. So you're talking about livelihoods, about food security, about gender equality, about feeding people, climate impacts. It is vast, and I think that's where there isn't a silver bullet, and there
Mm.
isn't a single solution. But I think for me, what's interesting about certification is that it's a very specific, science-based, evidence-based, third-party way to actually assess seafood sustainability, and therefore can be and is part of the solution, as are many other things. So, yeah, a fascinating area that brings in lots of different dimensions, and it's easy to understand in a way for people, because those who eat fish will go to the supermarket, they'll buy fish, and they want to buy fish increasingly that is sustainable. So what does that mean? It means that the fish stocks are fished in a way that is not detrimental to future fish stocks. It's not detrimental to the ecosystems around it, and you're catching the actual species you're trying to catch, rather than wastage. So there's lots of ways to do that well, and well-managed fisheries really contribute to all of that food security, GDP, etc., and can ensure the stocks survive in the future and contribute to healthy oceans. So yeah, it is vast, but as is anything in sustainability, I guess. And I think we're making progress, but we need a lot more attention from the finance sector to understand how their decisions can affect the entirety of the seafood supply chain, which the understanding is in general not there yet. So lots of work to kind of leverage from the climate space into this area.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I completely agree. I think with finance, it's a very big topic and sort of huge in size, both financial, monetary size, but then also just the topic. And sometimes I think um, start to sort of pick on one thread of the finance industry, and then if you start to realize just how big it is underneath and all of the sometimes complexity. And I think with the blue economy as well, it's a huge scale. Um, but at the same time, I think the collective we can't be too afraid of that. It's just picking those
Yeah.
places and really trying to make that change. And just sort of connecting your prior experience in finance and then what you're doing now. Are there some things from your prior experience when you were working directly in the financial industry that help you now in your current role? How does that learning work, if it does?
I think there's two main things. One is certainly, as you mentioned, Rebecca, like the contacts that we retain in the finance sector, and how helpful that can be now, particularly as people have changed or grown in their roles. So that's certainly been helpful for me, and others. But I also think just understanding the language of finance, it can seem opaque or confusing, but ultimately it's just in a way a language barrier for those who don't have that familiarity with finance. So when someone is talking about a sustainability linked loan, or a green or blue bond, or frameworks within the finance sector, kind of understanding what that means, or where to look for those, or how to connect them to other things, that's been really helpful. And so, yeah, I think those are the main things, really. And so I think when you work in an industry, you pick up the language, the lingo, you understand how things generally work. But yeah, I mean, I'm no expert in all areas of finance, as are probably very few people, because it's so vast. But you kind of understand the language enough to navigate different areas, and I think that's been incredibly useful. I'm still learning about finance today, and doing my own reading and understanding in that area. It's evolving as well, quite massively, actually, given
Mm.
AI and other things. So I think we all need to be continually learning, and how these intersect. But just having that basic understanding and fluency with the finance language has been definitely helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And I couldn't agree more on the language, and also on the continual learning. I think me too. I'm always learning about different topics, and there's a lot of evolution as well, which continues to happen, and I'm sure we'll do in all sorts of different ways. And maybe then a sort of final reflection question, and then I'll open in case you have any other comments. But um, looking back now, if you could go back and sort of give your former self some advice when you think about when you were working in the US in financial services, or maybe when you were studying, what would you say if you were talking to that former self?
Um, that is a good question. I was toying with the idea of doing a law degree in combination with my sort of undergrad business degree, and for various reasons didn't do that. I think that would have been quite helpful. So maybe um, thinking through that a bit more. I think at the time, I just wanted to roll up my sleeves and get into some work, and that there's value there. So, but I think, yeah, enjoying every part of it, and listening to yourself. I changed from being on the sales side to then doing some work on the trading side, and that was also illuminating. And you learn a lot because I was then managing risk that was 24 hours a day, and how that actually feels. If you've got big positions on that are
Mm,
changing value, and that are affected by so many things that are happening globally, it's easy to sort of talk about that. But until you actually hold those positions yourself, and if they, especially larger ones, then you don't really know how that feels. So that was also interesting. So yeah, I think just going back to trying things that interest you, always keeping learning mindset. um, what else? Maybe if I were to have thought about sustainability in the vein of working at the bank I was at Merrill Lynch at the time. But at the time, actually, there was very little going on in sustainability, and people were trying to navigate through the tumultuous financial crisis. So yeah, but I don't know. Those are a few thoughts, I think. And yeah, I think more will probably occur as we sort of progress through work and life. But yeah, I think it's always a hard question to answer, I think.
yeah, no, for sure. And I think for me too, I think definitely that learning piece. I think it's really important. It will just be that continual learning. I think also I didn't have this grand plan. So I think going to the things that bring energy, sometimes it can be a bit of a sideways move. It doesn't always go in this nice linear line,
Yeah.
and it's not always neat and tidy, and that's fine. That's normal. But sort of going to the things that bring energy and are interesting. I think it's yeah, sometimes only looking back, like, "Oh, yeah, um, I did do that thing," and it's because I had an interest in it, but you don't sometimes join the dots. I think there's a Steve Jobs quote about that. You can only join the dots, sort of when you have some time looking backwards. You can't look forwards and see how it's all going to join together. Um, yeah, thank you so much for your time. And then a final moment, are there any other sort of comments or sort of views you would like to share, please feel free.
Well, I guess it's, just being cognizant that your own individual thoughts and priorities may change over time. What you might want to achieve or do at some stage in your life may change, and that's okay, as you were kind of alluding to, Rebecca. Just
Mm,
don't be static in that, and follow your heart, and try to make a difference in the world, because that bringing meaning into your work is um, such a freeing experience. And if you can make work not feel like work because you're actually enjoying it, for the most part, and doing something meaningful, is a whole different conception of work itself. And I think that's been really, really nice. So yeah, I think just figuring out what your priorities are and what you believe in, and then not being afraid to sort of, yeah, take sideways moves, even down moves. People
mm,
are quite afraid to sort of go down in levels, but sometimes you need to, in order to be humble and to learn. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it can really help learning a new area from the ground up. So yeah, I think those are all good things. We're probably all going to be working for a very long time, and work itself will change. So yeah, the more you stick with what you really want to do and what you believe in, and stick to your values rather than have those imposed, I think that will serve you well, and have work not be a chore.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And that seems like a fantastic way to finish off. So thank you so much for the time today and for sharing all your thoughts. Really appreciate it. And yeah, it's just been great to hear.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.